Hey guys, how are you doing? This is Zev from Zed Outdoors and I hope you're having an awesome day. So today I am in a woodland in the county of Hampshire in the south of England. And this woodland is actually owned and managed by a buddy of mine, Dan. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you having me down.
Yep.
It's great to see you. So here's the backstory. Dan and myself have been connected for some time now online. This is the first time we've met up physically and he's very kindly invited me down to his location here. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Dan, Dan actually operates and manages and is the head instructor of a school full-time called Bushcraft UK Wilderness Living Skills. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So he's been teaching for many years. Dan is a very proficient, very talented bushcraft and outdoorsman, and he has a great deal of competency and a multitude of skills. Now, rewind back to the end of last year, at the time of recording this video, I started to do a lot of research into fish leather, okay, specifically salmon leather. So I saw some stuff online that kind of spurred my creativity and thinking, and looking at this discipline and thinking, well, how do they go about, getting raw fish, getting the skin and processing it so you have a usable skin at the end of it. And the history, unless I'm mistaken, it dates back a long time, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, a long time. Vikings using it and the Inuit people.
Yeah,
So,
but that is I wasn't aware it was that malleable, it was that versatile. In terms of what it was used for. But it was used for even footwear, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
by the natives and
it's
stuff.
surprising as well. You think fish on the feet, especially in cold conditions.
Yeah. And here's my misconception. When I thought about fish leather, I thought it'd be very soft and brittle, but it's actually not. It's actually quite a tactile.
Very tough, yeah.
Yeah, very tactile, tough piece of material. So what happened was I was doing some research. Now, at the same time, not long after, Dan had posted up a picture of a beautiful pouch that he made from a piece of salmon leather that he fully processed himself and that he made into a usable pouch using sinew.
Sinew.
And it was all natural materials and it was a beautiful pouch. And I was like, wow. Now we're actually going to be looking at that pouch shortly. Now what had happened was I messaged Dan and I said, look, is there any possibility I can come and see you and maybe learn this myself about this process? Now what had kind of grown from there is twofold. Now initially we discussed, Dan very kindly invited me down to this location to do an overnighter at the cabin that he's built himself right behind us. So that is going to be in a separate video where we're going to be doing a very relaxed overnighter, doing some cooking, relaxing, and kind of soaking in nature, especially at this time of year with so much of the woodland coming to life. And what has spurred on from there is Dan said, look, I can take some time out, Zed, I can show you the process from start to finish on how to get a raw piece of salmon skin and turn it into a usable piece of salmon leather. Now we spawned off from that conversation, and while I was here I said, Dan, are you okay that if, with your permission, I film this video where those of you watching yourself at home right now could kind of learn alongside me, you showing the entire process. And here's the goal, is with this video, what Dan's going to very kindly do methodically is teach you step by step, as well as for myself, from start to finish the entire process from getting a raw piece of salmon skin. And you can use other fish skins as well, which Dan will go into later in this video. And the exact process you need to go through using some very simple tools and materials to then have a usable piece of fish leather at the end of it that you can make a myriad of things from. So what we're going to do in this video, we're going to go through that process methodically, outlined step by step. Now, would I be right in saying that obviously there are some steps involved, but with each step, technically we could go into a lot of detail.
Yeah.
Would that be right in saying?
Yeah, so we covered the basics. So this is what I first started using. The pouch we look at was an oak bark tanned salmon skin. With tanning, there's so many methods of doing it. For instance, the fish skin, you can tan it using urine, you can tan it using bark from the trees. We could go really in-depth subject, but we're going to keep it nice and basic with things that you can get from the shops, eggs, vegetable oil, it's really as simple as that. The key is obviously the process that we're going to cover. And I really enjoyed it. I haven't been doing this for a long time. I've just over a year when I first tried making some salmon skin, and I was just amazed by how easy it is to do. So yeah, hopefully we can cover all of them basic steps and everyone can keep this beautiful skin and not throw it in the bin that most people do.
So that's the goal with this video. Like we just outlined, Dan just outlined, you could technically go into a lot of detail on the history and a multitude of ways of every step that he's about to show you. But really the goal with this video is to simplify that process so it enables you at home watching now to go out and actually incorporate these skills and turn a raw piece of salmon skin, fish skin into a usable piece of leather that you can use for your own projects. So that's what we're going to do here. And also we need to stress as well that Dan isn't saying this is the only way you do it, right? This is just his way of doing it. It's a proficient way of doing it, and you end up with a usable piece of fish leather at the end of it. So what we're going to do now, we're going to start off the video by actually looking at a parrot that inspired me to first start speaking to Dan about teaching me the process for turning salmon into a usable piece of leather. And then we're going to get into the tutorial, starting off with the actual salmon itself, where you source it, and then we'll work our way through. So without further ado, we'll get started with this tutorial where Dan Elmer is going to be teaching you how to make salmon leather. So Dan, to begin, looking at the pouch that first inspired me.
Yep.
So it's this one here, isn't it?
That's the one, yep.
So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what went into this?
Yeah, but this was actually quite an easy pouch to do. I'm by no means very good at sewing at all. The pouch talk about just obviously go back over, it is actually cotton sewn, this one. The sinew come into mind because we brought some sinew along for hopefully an end product. So yeah, just really nice. So this is actually an oak bark tanned. So we talked about the, being a number of methods of tanning the salmon skin. So as you can see, the coloration is brown. So we won't be discussing an oak bark tan today. But you can see it's really beautiful, really nice and tough material.
Because what amazed me before actually handling the leather is I used to think it was really soft and really brittle. But it's not. It's actually quite a tactile piece of material, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it surprised me the first time when I looked into, fish skin tanning. It is unbelievable to think that slimy skin on such a thin skin as well, because you can see on here, like, it's just so thin. How it can be so tough and durable. So this pouch actually made for, I was getting into roasting coffee beans, bushcraft style. So I thought I need a nice little pouch to put the beans in. And at that time when I had the salmon skin, I just thought, this is the perfect thing to make my coffee pouch out of. So yeah, really love it. I've only made this one pouch like this. Yeah, and really happy with it.
Excellent. So going straight into the tutorial, so would you say it's best to first look at the actual sourcing of the salmon and the fish? So what are your advice in terms of what to look out for?
So when purchasing the salmon skin, you want as fresh as possible. So for instance, if you go into the supermarkets, the chances are they've been on the ice for a good amount of time, and the logistics of getting it to the supermarket. So there's a lot of time that's passed, and with that skin, it can start to perish. The fish is getting older, so get it as fresh as possible. With the current circumstances that we've been facing, it was actually quite hard for me to source fish skin, so I had to buy salmon from the fishmongers. That isn't your best option because it will cost you a lot of money to buy a full salmon from the fishmongers. So what I actually pick skins up from a friend, and he gets them from a sushi bar. So they tend not to use the skins in a fishmongers. They will sell the fillets with the skins on. So you have to specifically ask for that. But as fresh as possible. If you haven't got time to do it straight away, put it in the freezer. We freeze stuff because as it comes out the freezer, it's as fresh as it went in. That's not a problem at all. So yeah, just as fresh as possible really, and try and avoid the supermarkets. Look for a sushi bar or a fisherman, but the thing is with catching salmon nowadays, you need a big pocket and some expensive fishing equipment, fly fishing, and you're limited by the time of year you can go out to catch them.
And in terms of the type of fish that you can use, are you limited to just salmon, or?
Not at all. a lot of people choose, it's going around at the minute, salmon skin, but actually you can tan any fish skin. Just as an example, over here we've got a bit of dogfish that we'll be using in the process as sandpaper. But again, just exactly the same process. This is tough because this hasn't had a tanning solution into it, so this is raw fish skin. But yeah, anything sea bream from the fishmongers or a fisherman. So these are actually caught by a local fisherman, the dogfish. Stingray skins are actually really popular. So if you look around line, actually make really expensive wallets from stingray skins. So yeah, it's any fish skin.
So lastly, on the topic of the fish skin, so your advice is to get it as fresh as possible.
Yep.
So would the idea be removing the actual flesh from the skin as quickly as possible as well? And in terms of the skin, and in terms of kind of the process that we're going to work through now, let's say hypothetically I were to able to source some skins, but I'm not going to work with them straight away. Is there a way of storing them so you can do that later, or?
Yeah, so the best option is to put them into the freezer. I think that's going to be everyone's first option. There is other methods, but we mostly won't go too much into them because they are really sort of technical ways of preserving the fish skins. But again, we want it as fresh as possible, so freezing is the best option.
Excellent. So lastly, is there anything else we should add on in terms of sourcing the fish skin? Would your advice be for those watching to basically source whatever you can and work with it? Would that be the case? Or?
Yeah, I mean, actually, salmon skin wasn't the first fish skin that I tanned. It was actually a rainbow trout that was caught from the stream, and it was only about this big, only a small little brown trout. Sorry, not rainbow trout. And I just started with that and learning the process. So go for something more accessible. Maybe you know someone that goes out trout fishing or on a boat for some bass, for instance, because there's not much difference between a bass and a salmon skin for the sort of shininess and the texture on it.
So what's the first step in the process?
So the first step is to remove the skin from the fish. You can see here the skin's already off. Going back onto current circumstances, this was bought from the fishmongers. They actually took the skins off and filleted the fish for me. When you get around to this step, again, it's a whole new thing to learn how to fillet a fish, but it's not too much of a problem. When you're good at filleting, you can see here there's just not really much flesh on there at all, and ideally when you're skinning a deer or a fish, you want to be doing it as clean as possible if you've got the intention to tan the skin after. It just saves you less work, makes less work going forward. So what we're going to do now is we need to get all of this flesh from the underside of the skin off, and we'll use a knife for this, so a blunt knife preferably. You can see there's just no edge on that at all really. Why we use a blunt edge is to prevent from slashing into the skin. But if you haven't got a knife to hand, you could do this with a butter knife. It comes off. You can see there my finger scraping how easy you can remove that flesh from the skin. So I brought along a couple of bits just as an example. So a shard of flint would take that flesh off real nice. You can see that's moving away. You can flick that off, and if we just look up here, there's again just a small folding knife that's blunt as well, and some flint knaps. So flint knapped knives that they would have skinned deer with back in prehistoric times. I do have to stress these weren't made by myself, they're actually made by a good friend of mine. But again, it's just perfect. There's no sharp edge on there, so we're not going to cause any damage whilst removing the flesh. So I'm just going to use the blunt knife for it, and what I'm going to do is just start off by scraping like that. There's a few different ways you can do this. You could either start from the top all the way to the bottom. What I tend to do is start from the middle, work my way down, and then as you can see on here, there's not much flesh, so we'll go here. We're just going to start removing the flesh off. There's a little bit of a time consuming job. I mean, this shouldn't take too long because it has been skinned nice and clean, so there's not much work for us to do, but what we want to make sure is that we remove every single bit of this flesh So what will happen if we don't remove all this flesh is we'll just leave opening it up for bacteria to grow. That will cause rot and ruin the skin. Also, this is an extra layer into our skin, so when we put our tanning solution into it, it won't penetrate into the skin. So I'm just going to go over real quick and get all this big stuff off, and then we'll just tidy it up. So you'll see I'm just scraping down. One thing you really want to avoid is going this way. Obviously it is a blunt knife, but if we go sideways, we're going to make an incision in the skin. You can also use, say for instance you're fishing down the beach and you catch yourself a nice big bass, just use one of the shells that's on the shore for removing the flesh.
I saw another mutual friend, Stephen Lassay, use a piece of slate.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, really nice. I actually spoke with Stephen last week, so I tried dogfish for the first time, skinning that, but just to stress, we talked about, you know, you can tan most fish skins, but they don't all skin the same. Dogfish, they were really tricky, so I spoke to Stephen, asked for some tips because I'd seen he had skinned a dogfish. Yeah, and it was we were down here for about an hour with pliers pulling the skins off the dogfish, but most of them are relatively easy to get off. And sometimes you get it all clump up on the knife, and I just sort of give it a little scrape with my fingers. One thing we want to do, obviously I'm going to go back over this, I'm just getting the majority of this big stuff off, is to go back over and just really work on the edges. It's the same when we're doing tanning deer skins. You tend to find you just get these tiny little bits of flesh that go in the folds on the skin, and that's all it takes for an onset of rot to start and ruin the skin. You can see I'm pushing really hard, so again, you know, it's not fragile skin, it's really tough stuff, so don't be afraid of putting some pressure on to remove it. So what we're looking for is that just there, a nice clean clear surface. Sometimes what you can do when you're tanning deer skins, I know it's another subject, but you can over flesh and you start going into the hair follicles, but with the fish skin you really haven't got to worry. You know, if you keep going like this for 5 minutes, it's not going to cause too much damage. So I'm just going to work back over the skin from the top to the bottom now and just get rid of all these small bits. So you can go in the opposite direction if it's easier, just to make sure we get every last little bit. Another thing you find sometimes is you get the little bits sticking on there. It's really annoying because you think they're not scraping off, but don't worry, because when we get to giving it a wash in a minute, all them bits will come off. Okay. So yeah, it's the same with everything with you know, that learning journey. There's always something coming up, and that's what I love about it. There's so many different methods of doing this process. Okay, so I'm not getting too carried away. I can see most of it's off now. What I'm going to do in a minute is just give it a wash, get rid of all these bits that I'm going over, and see what's left. Okay, so I'm just going to give that a rinse now.
So it's just a normal water, or just...
This is just water at the minute, yeah. It is a bit bubbly because I washed my hands in it earlier. But what I'll do now is just look through, and if any bits pull off, I'll just really take my time with this bit just to make sure everything's off, nothing's there to ruin the skin. So I can see there's still just a bit on the edge there, so we'll just go over that back bit.
So while washing, you're inspecting it too?
That's it, yeah, because like I said, you get these little bits that stay on there, and you just keep, you can see they're just sliding back on as I'm scraping them off. So giving it a wash just exposes anything that's actually attached to the skin. Just a few little bits there. Like this little end bit, just get rid of that. There we go. So what we're ready to do now with that is we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to flip it over. We're going to start removing the scales. Okay, so we've removed all the flesh. So if you see on this one, this is what we had before, this red pinky flesh on there. So we've removed all of that now. And what I'm going to do, again, take extra care, make sure you can get every little bit off, but don't worry too much, because going through the stages, shortly I'll be showing you and the next step in the process that will remove if there's accidentally any little bits left on there. So what we're going to do now is flip the skin over. So this is the really, you can see here where I've been fleshing from one side, from the underside, all of these scales are starting to come off, and this is what we need to do now on this side. So this is the really fun bit, so I'd recommend, not doing it in the kitchen. Find a nice space outside to do it, because it gets really messy. So I'm just going to turn that round, and you can see, if I just show you here, as I start to scrape, I'm coming from this side of the scales. If I was to go this way, it's a lot trickier. So we want to have it the side, so down to the tail, from the tail to the head, and then we can get underneath them scales. So what I'm going to do now is start from the tail and start removing every single one of these scales. So you think, oh, this is going to take a long time, but it's actually fairly quick. So you can see the scales removing. So don't be afraid of the section where the scale sits. Some of them might slightly tear, but it's not an issue at all. So again, I'm going to go over fairly quickly, removing as much as I can, and then I'll go over it again to make sure everyone's removed. What I find is I scrape them all off with the knife, and then you just find that, because they are really hard to see, so you have to sort of individually pick one or two out. Some of them can be a bit tricky, so do go the other way and try and get underneath the scale. So remove it. And you'll see it all clump up on the knife, so just keep giving it a little scrape, makes life a bit easier. You need to keep remembering as well just to fold out these edges. Doing it on the wood's really nice because it is sticky, so it sticks itself out. And one annoying thing with descaling it is obviously all the scales are on the block, so they keep sticking back to the skin. And again, like we did with the flesh side, we give it a rinse and come back to it. So we're removing the scales. When we're talking with the flesh, so we leave flesh on there, we just leave an area for bacteria to form. So obviously we leave the scales on, it's going to leave areas underneath for that to grow. And also when we get onto the tannin solution, these scales will stop the tannin solution penetrating the skin, and they are just eventually going to come out. So it's just going to be a really messy skin if you tried to leave them on. So I think that's one thing that does baffle people, because when you look at a complete tanned fish skin, it looks like the scales are still on there, and this is these grooves here that give it that effect. I don't know if there's a scientific word for this sort of netting on the skin. I haven't looked into that. If I can get a little bit trickier getting up near the neck here, you can see it's sort of bigger clumps of it, scales. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is give it a rinse off and clean this board. I usually do this a couple of times, just because it's so messy, they keep sticking back onto the skin. So we're going, you can see now we've got that flesh and the scales removed. It just goes really small. It's yeah, amazing stuff. So we'll just rinse these scales out. And then what I actually do is, in the water, just inspect through and see where I need to work. And if there's any I can pull out with my fingers, I will. What I do is I'm just running my fingers as well, just to see if I can catch any, because they are quite hard to see, especially on the belly where it's more whiter. That's looking good. So I'll just clean off the board we're working on. So I'm just going to go over it once more. What I'll do is I'm actually just going to go over with my fingers to start with, because it doesn't seem like there's many left on here.
So at this stage you would stress that people take their time, be thorough.
Yeah, I mean, there's no need to rush it. I find it quite sort of relaxing actually doing this. And there's no rush. You know, you could spend 2 hours on it if you like, and if you, always stress not to rush these sort of things, because you'll put so much effort into it, and if you do make that small mistake, it can ruin the skin. So yeah, just making sure every single one of these scales is off. Again, some are going to stick back to it, but once we've done this, we are going to wash it again. So you can see this is quite a big clump. It looked like it wasn't there. You can see there's quite a lot still in there. The edges up near the neck tend to, you spend a bit more time around there looking. Okay, so that is the skin now defleshed and descaled. There might be the odd one stuck on there, but what we're going to do now is we're going to wash it in a fairy liquid, so a soapy solution, to degrease the skin. Okay, so now we've defleshed and descaled the skin. What we're going to be doing is just adding some fairy liquid to water and degreasing the skin.
So for those outside the UK, any form of detergent, basically, washing detergent?
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever used fairy, so stick with fairy.
Does that explain your soft hands?
Yeah, so yeah, my nice soft hands. So we just pop that into the washing bowl, pop a little bit of fairy liquid in there. So this gives us time now to, again, just look over and any scales that are stuck to the skin to get them off.
So what is the goal of the fairy here? Is it to remove all the fat content from the
oils?
So
it's quite an oily skin, quite greasy, so we're just getting rid of all of that prior to putting it in our tanning solution. Makes it smell good too, and you get to wash your hands. But also, again, it's just another opportunity just to make sure we've got all of them scales off. I wouldn't worry too much. If you have the odd one or two that you've missed, it's really not going to affect the skin. It will just drop off through the processing that we've got to continue after this. So it's looking pretty good. Oh, I can just feel one on my finger. Oh no, it's just a bit of dirt from in the bowl. Yeah, it's not the cleanest of bowls. A fair bit of rust on it. So yeah, that's looking good. So what we're going to do now is just put that to one side and mix up our tanning solution. Okay, so what we're going to be doing now is actually making our tanning solution to put the skin into. So for this, what we're going to be using is 1 egg yolk. Okay, so just some eggs bought from the shop. I have got chickens here, but I just bought these in case they didn't lay any. And also, not everyone's got chickens in the woods, so the local co-op is absolutely fine. So I'm just gonna, I'm not the best person at cracking eggs, but let's move it away. So I'm just gonna try and there we go. So we've still got the yolk in there. Pass it through a couple of times, and in goes our egg yolk. I'll just give the egg yolk, break it up a little bit. So what I'll do is I mix this up a little bit now, because what we don't want is big clumps of yolk on the fish skin. Okay, and now the next thing I'm going to add to it is just roughly around about a teaspoon of vegetable oil. It's a fresh one, so we have to open that up. Okay, so that's mostly about a teaspoon. It doesn't matter if you get it bang on, but if you do put too much in, it will just make a really, really oily skin. So I'm just going to mix that up. What I'm actually going to do as well is just pop a little bit of water in there, not too much. I'm just going to mix this up really well. So what we're doing now is making, there's a helicopter go over, I'll wait till that passes. Our woodland's situated on a flight path for the RAF base, so we get a lot of Chinooks flying over. So some people actually put a little bit of washing detergent, a bit of fairy liquid in with the mixture as well. I've never done it because I've just given it a good wash in the fairy liquid, so I don't see the reason for putting it in our tannin solution. So we're mixing up the egg yolk, the vegetable oil and a bit of water, and we're going to make an emulsifying oil that's going to penetrate into the skin, and as we soften the skin, this is what will keep it soft really. We try and keep it as simple. I mean, it's a really sort of, there's a lot of scientific words that you can put into the processing, but what we want to do is to teach you just the really simple basics of it. You can look really in depth going forth. I mean, you could dry that out now on a rack and you'd be left with a raw dried salmon skin. It's absolutely fine, it's functionable, it's pliable, you can turn it into a craft item. But what we're looking for is a really soft, supple leather at the end of this. There we go. So I'm just going to pop this one egg yolk and this mixture here is enough for 4 salmon skins. Obviously we haven't done the other one, we're just focusing on this one. It's absolutely fine. So just give it a good mix up, rub your fingers in there, really make sure it's touching every single part of the skin. And unlike doing tanning big game like deer skins, we only need to do this once, and we only need to leave it in there for about 20 minutes for it to absorb all the natural proteins in the solution. So there we go. So we're just going to leave that now, like I said, just to set for 20 minutes, and then we'll be on to the next step. Okay, so the fish skin's been soaking in solution for about 30 minutes now. So what we're going to do is take it over to our drying frame. I'll grab myself a little dolly peg. So what I'm going to do is just take the skin out, and I'm just going to give it a wring. So that solution should have soaked into the skin nicely now. Just give it a squeeze. So you can see just from squeezing it, there's a lot of solution in the skin. So if you're going to do this at home, you could actually hang this inside the house. It's actually quite nice today that the sun's not out because we don't want to dry it too quickly. So a nice shaded area pegged up on a tree or in the the hallway. I wouldn't recommend putting them on radiators to speed up the drying process because it will damage the skin. So I just got a little peg here. So what I'm going to do is just place it onto this frame. So just next to it you can see there's a skin on there. Still got quite a bit of processing to do. We've got to start working that skin. So sometimes what I actually do is, if I've got more pegs, I'll put like a twig at the back, and then I'll peg the twig out just so it stops it folding around. But for now, that's looking good to go. And what I'm going to do with this is, for the next sort of couple of hours, I'm just going to change it over because obviously this is folded over here, so it's still going to contain quite a lot of moisture. So I will be reversing it as we go, but we're going to mostly leave that now until tomorrow morning, and we're going to see where it's at with the drying, and if ready we're going to go on to actually working the skin and getting it nice soft and supple. So yeah, we'll just leave that up overnight, and hopefully by the morning we're sort of ready for the next stage. This one here is drying out quite nice, so that's ready for some working. Okay, so this is day 2 of our fish skin leather. So this has been out overnight drying. We've had quite dry conditions. The wind's been blowing, so it's done a real good job. And you can see there, we're now left with a nice crispy dry salmon skin. So what we're going to do is move on to the next step, and usually what I'd do is rehydrate this skin in some water before working, but due to the time scale, what we're going to do is we're actually going to apply some neat's foot oil into it, and then we're going to move on to the next step, and that's working this skin to make it into a supple, pliable fish skin leather.
So with the water, if you did have the time, for those watching at home, what is the process for that in soaking it in water?
Yeah, so I just put it in water for maybe just under 5 minutes, and just to make it more sort of workable, what I do is when it's been hydrated in the water, I then work it until it's dry. So I know I'm putting the work into it to get. It's just kind of like a little thing I do just to make sure I'm getting it completely worked. But with the neat's foot oil, it's effectively going to do the same thing. Okay, so we've got our dried salmon skin here. So what we're going to talk about now is this is neat's foot oil. So it's a leather conditioner. It's really nice for finishing off skin. So I actually use this on all the skins I tan. It's not an essential step, but I just find it gives you a lot more of a softer finish. And we're just going to slightly rehydrate this skin with some. So I'm just going to pop a little bit to the side because I really don't want to put too much on there. And I'm just going to use my finger and just rub it all the way across the skin. You can see these corners are going to be really tough. We're going to be working these with our fingers, so I'm going to make sure I get some in there. You can see it's starting to soften back up and rehydrate.
So do you apply this to the outside of the skin or the inside? Does it not make a difference?
So this is on the inside. To be honest, it doesn't make a huge difference because we removed the scales, but I just tend to stick to the underside. Actually, sorry, yes, it does make a difference. we do want to put it on the underside because we've got this like webbing that the scales were in. We really don't want to damage that, so all of the working we're going to be doing from the underside. Okay, so that's all we need, just a nice layer at the top, and I can feel that starting to sink in. Okay, so now we've got that oil on, we're just going to relocate ourselves to an area where we can work the skin. Okay, so we've come and got ourselves comfortable now, ready for work in the fish skin. So I've just come over to sit on this bench, so you can see here there's a nice blunt sort of edge on there, no sharp points. I'm going to be working the skin on this, so you don't have to use a bench. You could use a hazel rod into the ground and you can work over that, or you could place a wire between 2 trees and work on that. Just any dull surface, no sharp edges, would be absolutely fine to work on. So I've made myself comfortable because I'm going to be sat here mostly for over an hour. it could take you 4 hours. The aim of the game is just to be working this hide until it's completely, until it's soft and pliable to your satisfaction, you know. Don't be worried if you don't achieve a toilet paper soft fish leather. We just want it a lot softer than that crispiness that we've got now. So what I'm going to do, again, working the underside, apologies for earlier, we don't want to do anything on the scale side, we don't want to ruin this this lovely pattern. And I'm just going to start rubbing it. So with the neat's foot oil that we placed into it, it's the same as when I was mentioning the water. Neat's foot oil is not necessary, but what I can do now is actually work this until it's completely dry again. It's just a little bit of a sort of thing for me to know the stage, like how long to carry on for. So you can see I'm actually pulling really hard down on that. Don't be afraid, it's not going to snap in half. I really want to be working, and what we're doing is breaking up all the fibres. So if we look on this one, for instance, a little bit of work's been done on here. You can see this fibre starting. This has still got a lot of processing that we'll cover in a minute. But yeah, just breaking up all the fibres in that skin. So I'll just keep working up and down the skin. What we do want to do is also use our fingers, so we can start stretching it, and we can really focus with our fingers on these edges and on the ends, the tail and the head. And when you first start, you're going to think, oh, this is not going anywhere. But it really doesn't take long to start seeing progress. But I'll go back to this step for now. If I work just one area, just for a minute, you'll start to see it's going to open up a lot more as well. If you remember, prior to this stage, when it was drying, it was just really thin, shriveled in. So you can hear that difference just to there. After a little bit, you can hear. Oh, there's this. There we go. So yeah, we're just going to continue this now for a couple of hours, really. And this is the hard graft.
So a question, with obviously smaller fish you're going to try this out with, this kind of process you'd have to be a little bit more careful, wouldn't you? Because you haven't got as much to grab onto, would that be right? Yeah,
it does come a little bit more difficult. You can see when I get to this tail bit here, I literally have it at the tip of my fingers just to get this end bit. That's like I was saying, with using your fingers, you actually have to really work hard. Just to get, I mean, to be honest, some of this can be really time consuming, getting this tiny little bit. So just to snip off a tiny bit with a knife is, you know, it's not going to ruin it at all. But if you do take your time just working it with your fingers, it will eventually soften up the same as the centre. The rest of it. But I can already feel that now. If you have a little feel. It's just already starting to get a lot softer, and that's just after like 5 minutes. So as we progress through the time, it's it's going to become really nice. And you can just hear that crispiness is starting to fade as well. So what we will do is again, this is going to have continuous working. We're working it now on this edge, but we're actually going to, the next step that we get onto, we'll be using sandpaper and the sort of breaks fibre. So again, it's just every time it's being touched and moved, it's being worked. Okay, so we're sort of about 35 minutes in now to work in the skin, and we can already see a lot of progress. So we've lost that really crackling sound. We come down to this tail, we've lost that on here now. We're starting to get nice soft supple leather. One thing I just wanted to touch on a little bit is using your fingers, because the trickiest bit is along these edges, the belly side and top side, is to just do a bit of a push and a pull technique. So I'm just pulling with this thumb whilst pushing into these edges, and what I can do is just really get in there, working the skin to get these tricky bits soft. And as I'm pushing and pulling, I can actually feel the flexibility coming into the skin, so I know we're making good progress. But you really do need to focus on these tail areas. You can see that it needs a lot of work. But like I said, it's not too much of an issue on the very small bits down here. You can just cut them slightly, and up on the head, just make an incision across there. I mean, if you're going to make it into a craft item, the chances are you're going to be cutting it in various places anyway. So these edges shouldn't matter too much.
And you were mentioning something just off camera, and I thought it's important to get it on camera, is about when we're rubbing it along the edge of, obviously a smooth surface, not to focus just on one area because it gets too hot.
Yeah, that's correct. So, we get a bit carried away and we just work one area, you could obviously friction, so it will get really hot underneath. So we want to try and avoid that for damaging the skin. So what I tend to do is, as I'm working, I can actually feel the heat on my fingers, and if it starts to get too hot, I'm just moving across. But I work quite quickly across the skin all the way down, and I'll take a couple of times along the bench and then back out onto the fingers, just not forgetting to work them edges and tough to get areas.
So what are the signs you're looking for in terms of what areas need work? Is it the stiffness and the
Yeah, the sound. So obviously this is, you can barely hear a sound. So if I come down again to this end, it's got that really sort of crispy, dry touch. And up here, this is a larger area, so it's a lot easier for us to, we're hitting a lot of surface when we're working it, so it's softening up a lot quicker than the smaller bits. So we'll continue this again. We're just going to keep going until we get it to the state that we want it. I mean, as it is now, that is a craftable piece of skin. We could easily turn that into a pouch if we wanted to. Yeah. So you can see as I'm working the skin as well, this is the black side, the top side, and the silver, the belly. So I'll work along this one edge, and then I just make sure to flip the skin around and then start working that belly edge. And you will find the belly will soften up a lot quicker than the top. With the belly, obviously on a fish, if you felt a fish and caught a fish, the belly's always nice and soft and smooth. Okay, so we've been working the skin now for about an hour and a half, and as you can see, it's just becoming really nice and soft now. But there's still a little bit of work to do, but what I want to do now is just go on to turning this onto the underside. We're actually just going to use some sandpaper to rough up these fibres on here, just to especially on the edges. You can see it's dark here, so if I break that away, you'll see them fibres coming apart. So what I want to do is, the sandpaper just makes an easier job to break these all up and make sure we get a nice softness on the edges. So actually going to try this for the first time. Well, this is a bit of dogfish skin. So traditionally was used as sandpaper. They actually used to sand down the decks of ships with this stuff. It's a new one to me, so we're going to give it a try for the first time. But you can just use modern day bit of sandpaper from B&Q or Wix. This is a 180 grit sandpaper. So what I'm going to do is just starting at the neck here, just start fluffing and tidying up all these fibres. So you can see they're just breaking up really nice. And the dogfish skin is just unbelievable, really works well. I'm not going to go too over the top, but you can see this nice patch here. This is what I'm going to aim for over the whole skin.
So do you also need to be very careful how far you're going in?
Yeah, like we were saying with the working on the bench too far, getting it hot and damaging the skin. We just literally want to remove the surface area. So yeah, we won't go over the top, we'll just do. First time using the dogfish as well, it is really, really abrasive. Working in them corners especially, I mean we've got a nice, it's nice and soft in the middle here. It's just these edges, there's a slight bit of stiffness still there. Just a little bit harder to break the fibres up with your fingers. So I'm just going to work down the whole length of the skin doing this. And then I'm just going to continue maybe for another 30 minutes working it with my fingers and over the bench again. So you do have to be a little bit more careful because obviously as it's getting softer it can become a little bit more susceptible to tearing. It's still tough as old boots, we just take an extra bit of care. Last thing we want to do is to ruin it after all this work. So what I'm doing is I'm sanding it. I'm actually feeling areas that need a bit more work doing. So I'll keep that in mind for after this step, just to concentrate on them areas. And if we try with some of the modern sandpaper, just an example, take a small strip off. See which was actually working best. So the dogfish is actually getting it off a lot easier. Like I said, this is 180 grit, we could use a lower grit. But yeah, the dogfish is working really well. So the dogfish skin isn't tanned, it is just taken off of the fish, the flesh removed and then just simply dried out. Okay, so we're just finished off a very last bit of sanding. This has had a little bit more work done with our hands, only for around about 20 minutes. So you can see we're just at quite a nice soft state now, and we're quite happy to sort of move forward with this. So what I'm going to do now is, at this stage, I'm just going to put again a little bit more neat's foot oil on, so we've got quite a big spill there, so just a really, really thin layer on this. This will be the final application of the neat's foot oil. Just a very small amount, we'll just rub that in. Okay, so now we've got that neat's foot oil on, we're just going to move on to the next step, and that's smoking the skin. Okay, so we're on the final step now of doing our fish skin leather. and that's smoking. So there's many different ways that you can do this. We're quite simply just going to place our drying rack over the fire, place some punky rotten wood that I've soaked onto the fire to give us some real nice smoke. Unfortunately, the wind's a little bit all over the show at the minute, but you can see just there as an example, it is going to get up and into the skin. So again, you know, you could do this in so many different ways. There is much more effective ways in doing this. It just means, you know, building a box, for instance, a little metal tray with some smoky wood. But like I said, for this one, we're just going to hang it over the fire. What we don't want is it close to the fire, to the heat source, anything that's going to potentially, you know, damage our skin. So nice and high, and just let that smoke gradually go into it. So if I just place the skin up here, you can really hear that wind. It's picked up quite a lot. So I'm just going to make sure that's nice and secure with that peg. And I've just soaked up just a small bit of punky wood. So this is rotten wood, it's quite spongy. I'm just going to place it onto the fire. And you can see it's just really picking up that smoke where it's wet as well. Unfortunately, the wind is blowing it all out the way. But we're just going to leave that now for, you know, however long it takes whilst we're here, 3 to 4 hours. Hopefully we get some smoke into the skin. If not, you know, we can then build a contraption to place the skin into, so it really does sort of soak it all up. But I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and like I said, we've said this is a basic step to producing a fish skin leather, and we're really happy with the way this one turned out, and hope you enjoyed the video.
And so the purpose of the smoking, once again, is to kill off any of the last...
Of course, yeah, sorry. It's, so with the smoking, I completely missed that bit. We're smoking the skin, so it gives it an extra bit of waterproofing, and it also just sort of deters any bacteria from growing on the skin. So just as an example, if you picture the prehistoric roundhouses, they would always have a fire burning in the centre of that, and on top of the roof, for the roof was skins, so that smoke was constantly penetrating into them skins and acting as a waterproof agent.
And so, to finalise, if obviously people watching are going to do this smoking part at home, what's your suggestion then for about 3-4 hours to...
Yeah, just a couple of hours, I'd say, for smoking. It's such a small skin. If you can really get it confined into a tight space, that smoke staying in there is only going to be a couple of hours. But over the fire here, we're going to be looking at 3 to 4 hours maybe, just letting that smoke go in if the wind doesn't blow our skin into the fire.
And then after that, basically your skin is ready to use.
And then the skin's ready to use, that's it. So you can craft yourself a little pouch out of it. If you've got, you know, more than just one skin, you can start looking into quite sort of really in-depth projects like making some boots from them. Yeah, there's all sorts. The web, there's plenty on there to sort of have a little look around.
So there you have it, my friends. That is a wrap for this video. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, mate. Appreciate it.
Dan's been an absolute trooper. Like we mentioned before, this filming has been done over a period of 2 days, obviously because of the intermediary stage where we had to let the skin dry out. In between that, what we have been doing is actually been sleeping in the cabin that Dan and your father, I believe it was, had built. We have done a separate video on that. If that video is already out by the time you're watching this video, you can click the link below in the description, that will take you to that. It was very laid back. It was more about just spending time, planning future collaborations. So with this particular video, a couple of things I need to stress. We already mentioned this numerous times throughout this video and at the beginning, but it's worth mentioning at the end. Number one, this is kind of Dan's process, which is constantly evolving. So he's not telling you this is the only way in which to do this, okay? This is just what he's found that works for him. And the second thing that we need to stress is that for each of the various stages is, would I be right in saying it's like a rabbit hole of information?
It is, yeah. It's
such
a lengthy subject. So many different ways of, you know, tanning skins, smoking skins, you know, fleshing skins. It's just, you know, like we said, you got the urine, you got the bark tans, you got the eggs. You know, there's just so many different ways of doing it. This is just what's worked for me. It works well, and it's a nice, easy, simple process.
Because our goal with this video, and we've been doing this actually throughout the filming of what you're watching now, we were trying to make sure we convey the information in a way where it's as simple as possible, because the primary intention with Dan doing this video is that you watching actually give this a go. You know, this is something I believe that, you know, you were really sincere about encouraging people to kind of follow what you've outlined, basically. And do this at home.
Yeah, hopefully, you know, I love seeing, you know, when people watch these videos and what they come out with at the end, and it's just that spiraling learning journey. Once you produce, for me, when I produced that first salmon skin, on such simple steps, that was it, I was hooked. So now, you know, I'm just on that spiraling path of learning all the different methods and ways and what to create with it after.
Yeah, and this is our goal. So on that note, I want to stress a couple of things. That take this information away and give it a go. Obviously, Dan has talked about earlier on in this video about how to procure and the best ways of procuring the actual initial skin itself, and obviously then talking you through the various steps along the way using relatively simple equipment, okay? All it takes is a bit of time and a bit of graft, and you end up with obviously something that you can then go away with and make crafts projects with, etc., whatever it is you have in mind. So I would encourage you to think about, if you haven't done so already, about actually doing this, actually doing what's outlined in this video, what Dan has been teaching you. And on that note, as with all the tutorials that I do on my channel, if you watched any of those previously, I would encourage you that if you do give this a go, no matter what stage you're at, and you post any photos or videos online on social media, please do tag the two of us. What I'm going to do, and that leads me on to the final point I'll be making in a moment, and that is obviously, needless to say, I will be linking to Dan's social media down below in the description, both his Instagram, Facebook, and his website. So no matter where you're posting it, please tag us. It's really awesome seeing, like what you said, you know, people giving this a go, regardless of what stage you're at, you know, to tag us in the photos or your videos that you're posting up, to kind of, so we can see, hang on a second, there's people out there that are actually giving this a go. So what I'm going to do, like I said, that leads me on to the final point. I will put a link below to Dan's social media and his website. On his website, you can find out a lot more information about the myriad of courses and expeditions he has going on, but also about the stuff he's up to generally, kind of day to day. And social media, he's posting obviously in real time, day to day. He teaches full time, he does this on a full time basis. He's a very skilled guy. Dan specializes in a lot of things, including 18th century reenactment.
Yeah, it's a big passion for me, the 18th century, so I've been pursuing that. So you might have seen the Lyde River Rendezvous that we actually hold here at the trading post. So yeah, just sort of driving that. I really love the history behind it, and you know, it's got a great element in the bushcraft, what we do, you know, flint and steel, the tanning, everything in it. It's so interesting to learn the subject.
And on the topic of the 18th century, we are potentially, don't want to say too much now, potentially doing a bigger collaboration on that very theme. But we're kind of like, we're going to see how that pans out. But the point being is that Dan just gets up to a lot of genuinely cool stuff. That's why I'm honoured. You know, he's allowed me down there, spend some time with him in his woodland, and to discuss these things and see these things. So following him on social media and his website, you'll be able to keep up to date with all the myriad of things that he has going on. So once again, we genuinely hope you enjoyed this video. You got a lot of value from it. A reminder, please do tag us if you go ahead and give this a go. And on that note, we would encourage you to give this a go. You know, give this a bash, even if you take your time with it, and you may make some mistakes along the way. That's how you learn. I know I spoke to Dan, like the first thing I'm doing as soon as I'm getting back is getting hold of some salmon skins, right? But I'd be really eager to try this out, but I didn't know what to do. So even filming this, and obviously with you watching, it's the first time I've seen the entire process, you know. So on that note, are there any parting words from yourself?
Just like, you know, I hope everyone enjoys the video, and you know, it's actually, it is the first time for me doing a YouTube video, so I really appreciate your time coming down, and we're doing this together. But yeah, overall, I just hope people can get a nice skin done, make some beautiful craft items, and yeah, hopefully we get some more going soon.
Yeah. And as luck would have it, just as we're approaching the end of the filming, the sun comes out, it's a bright blue day, we've had rain and all sorts, so up until then. But on that note, we genuinely hope you enjoyed the video. Please do leave any comments and feedback down below. Share this video with anyone you feel may gain some benefit from this. And once again, please do connect with Dan on his social media and his website. Links will be down below. Also, there will be a link down below, if it's out now by the time you're watching this video, of the camp out I've done with Dan. He cooked a mean salmon, man. It was so good. We had a whole piece of salmon left over.
Yeah, we had plenty
of
it. We
were so full up. But yeah, you can see all the links are down below. So once again, sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. Please do kind of subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We're going to have a lot more videos coming up with Dan. on future topics and tutorials. So on that note, as always, I hope whatever you're doing, you have a blessed day, a blessed week ahead. From myself, Zad Outdoors, and Daniel Elmer, peace out.